How to stop attracting difficult women. This video is for you guys. I get a lot of emails from subscribers telling me, Michelle, don't forget, women are not the only ones that are victims of narcissistic abuse. You know, there's a lot of information for women. We need some help too. So I put together this video because I want to talk about a few things that I notice in my face-to-face coaching, a few things that come up a lot with some of the men that I coach, so that you can start seeing the patterns. And in that way, you can stop attracting women that not only are difficult, possibly narcissistic, but in truth, women that are keeping you from happiness. Tip number one is to learn to be comfortable in the discomfort of others. What I've noticed in my face-to-face coaching is that a lot of men that wind up with difficult women feel very uncomfortable if their partner is angry, upset, stressed. They feel extremely uncomfortable, as if it's their job or their responsibility, or worse, their fault, that that person is feeling that. Now, it would be so easy for me to say, just stop, right? Stop. But saying stop definitely is not the answer. It's more about understanding why that happens. If you can understand why that comes up inside of you, then you can analyze it and start kind of putting it into perspective. So what I've seen is that that often happens because maybe in childhood, somewhere in childhood, you were made to feel responsible for somebody else's feelings. If that's done over and over, that teaches a child that they're not allowed to feel good unless they are making sure that the other parent is happy. This can be done on a small scale, and it can be done on a more manipulative scale as well. But the point is that if you felt somewhere in your childhood that you only made your parent happy or your caregiver happy when you were doing for them, then that means in adulthood what will happen is whenever you are faced with doing something that you like and your partner doesn't, right? Or if you're faced with choosing something that you want to do versus what they want to do, you're always giving in. You're always putting the other person first. It's always about them, because in your mind, without realizing it, those dynamics in childhood you're still keeping alive by, I need to make this person happy all the time. I can never go against what they say. I can never have a different perspective because it brings up so much negative feelings inside. That's keeping that old program alive. The only kind of woman that's going to be attracted to a man like that is a taker. Is a woman that only wants to take, that only wants you to do what she wants to do, that only wants you to, see her perspective and forget about your perspective. So when we realize that the first step in changing the kind of people we're attracted to and the kind of people that are attracted to us is changing how we feel when we are faced with opportunities to choose, to show or reveal who we really are or how we really feel. And learning to bring that to the table, even if somebody doesn't like it. And that kind of leads to tip number two, making sure that you stay you. So what usually happens in a toxic relationship is that one person makes the other person their whole life. They start revolving around that other person. It's not like they set out to do that. It's not like it's a conscious thing. But it kind of has to do with tip number one, because if you're uncomfortable with somebody being upset, toxic women will often make you feel bad or guilty when you are doing something for you. They will wake up that guilt that probably, okay, and I'm saying this to any man that has been in several different toxic relationships, the reason for that is probably because you were made to feel guilt as a child. Right? If you wanted to do something different than your parents wanted you to do, or your caregivers, or whoever in your life that was that had these unhealthy dynamics, if any time you wanted to do something different or you wanted to do something for yourself, if you were made to feel guilty, then in adulthood, that same guilt, if you have not worked through it, is going to come up, and it's going to kind of push you to deny yourself, right? Whatever's going to make you feel guilty. So now you're like going through life trying to avoid guilt. And so what will happen is, in a relationship, let's say you want to do something with your friends and your significant other gets upset because she wants all of your attention. That could be tempting to feel like, oh, she loves me, she wants to be with me. And it's tempting to say no to your friends because you think that you're getting this love that you've been craving for a long time. But the truth is that somebody healthy is going to respect your boundaries. They're going to respect that you have also a life of your own, that you enjoy doing things that you've been doing for a long time before this person entered your life, and they're not going to demand that you stop. But if they do, if you're not sure if you're in a relationship with somebody toxic, one of the best ways to find out is to make sure that you're still living your life. What are the things that you love to do, even though you're in this relationship? What are your passions? What are your hobbies? What are things that you do on a day-to-day basis that just make you feel good about you? Make sure that as a relationship progresses, you're not doing less and less of those things, because then you become revolving around this person. And again, the only kind of dynamics you're going to get is with a difficult or toxic woman, because that's what they're going to demand, and you're going to get sucked into that. Tip number 3 is don't worry about what you think she wants you to be. I remember one time during a coaching session, my client said to me, Michelle, you know, he's telling me about his date, and he's telling me everything that he was worried about what she would think of him. And he's telling me all these things about her and what he thinks she was thinking, and he's like analyzing, and his whole focus is on like external. And so I asked him, I was like, well, did you like her? And he kind of chuckled, and he was like, you know, Michelle, honestly, I was so focused on whether or not she was liking me or she would like me that I didn't even evaluate that. He's like, I didn't even have it in my mind to be evaluating if I liked her or what I liked about her. So learn from that mistake, okay? If you're getting to know somebody, don't be overly preoccupied with whether or not they like you. Be preoccupied with being you. Be your real self. Because if she doesn't like you for you, that's okay, and there's no loss there, right? But if you have to change to make sure she likes you, then you're not being your authentic self, and down the road you will be unhappy. Even though in the beginning we think we're happy making someone else happy, sacrificing self to make someone else happy, it sounds good, it sounds nice, but down the road our inner self gets really mad at us for not being authentic. So start getting to know the person the right way from the beginning by being yourself. And that leads me to the last tip, which is recognizing your worth in your eyes. Okay? If you don't see value in yourself, if you don't see the kind of person you are, then the other person isn't going to see it either. Okay? Sometimes we think if that person sees our value, then we have value. But that's a lie, and that's wrong. And it also makes you dependent on external validation. If you see your value, then the energy you put out, right? Energy is emotion in motion. So the emotions that are going to be coming out of you are self-worth, self-value, and self-respect. And we teach people how to treat us. We teach people how to feel about us by how we treat ourselves, how we feel about ourselves. So make sure you take time to work on your self-esteem, work on your self-worth. And our self-worth is like a muscle, okay? If we're not exercising it and we're waiting for somebody else to validate it, then it's never going to happen. So how do you do that? Pay attention to your inner dialogue. Okay, I'm going to share something that happened recently with a client that I have, and he was telling me he's working on his, his value, his self-esteem after a difficult relationship. And he told me, he's like, we were kind of strategizing on, different ways that would be most beneficial for him to raise his self-worth. And I asked him what his inner dialogue was, and he gave me the typical response that most people that have been through narcissistic relationships, whether it's with a parent or a significant other or both. He said, I'm just really hard on myself. I push myself. And as we're talking, it was very clear, he realized that he saw that nothing he ever did in his own eyes was ever enough. So we talked about changing that inner dialogue, and we talked about what it would sound like, right? And it was funny because he's like, Michele, he's like, it feels weird to say to myself, good job. It feels weird to say, to see value in myself and give myself credit and say something nice to myself. And, self-talk is weird, he said. So I asked him, I was like, well, if you were to tell yourself, yeah, so what, you did that, but, you could have done better, how would that feel? And he started laughing, and he's like, that would feel good. That would feel normal. So my point is that it wasn't the self-talk that was uncomfortable, but it was the compassionate inner dialogue that was uncomfortable. And yet, if we don't change that, if we don't change our compassionate dialogue, and we are never enough in our own eyes, then we are projecting out, and people will then treat us in that same way. So it really all starts with how we are with ourselves on the inside. Those are just a few tips. They could be for men, they could be for women. They work either way, honestly. And if you start putting them into practice, I would love to hear how it goes for you. So make sure you share your experiences in the comment section below.